Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 31st of October. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to start with the South Donetsk region. I believe that this region is the most important one, the most interesting these days, where the Russians started their counter-offensive operation or offensive operation, trying to develop their bridgehead and so on. This is the Western sources map. As you can see, there are still no updates in this area, but we know that the Russians are storming or pushing the Ukrainians all along the front line, started from Avdiivka to Ugledar, this town, to be more precise, in direction of Pavlovka. According to this map, there are no changes in this area at all. But the Russians provided us some information in this area, and as you can see, there are a lot of icons in this area, and now we need to discuss and understand, do the Russians have any progress in this area, or they don't have any progress but they're just wasting their soldiers? Let's try to understand. First of all, if we take a look at Piesky, at our Vadian, as you can see, there are no changes. The Russians achieved success. They managed to establish their position in the south part of Vadiane. Now they're developing their bridgehead, trying to establish the safe roads to this area when they will be able to bring the rockets, the ammo, shells, reinforcements, so on. So I believe that they control the situation totally. They know that anyway Oputna and the entire part of Vadiane Pervomaisk is going to fall. It's not the question of whether this area is going to fall, it's just a question of time when the Russians are able to complete this mission. I believe that by the end of November or maybe in the beginning of December, Vadiane, Oputna and maybe Pervomaisk will be taken by the Russians. Furthermore, the Russians will be able to start the clashes for Nitailova and something like this. So as you can see, for now the Russians control the situation in Piesky totally. Now they need some time to regroup, to be on the safe side and not to lose this position if the Ukrainians started their own counter-offensive operation in direction of this area. Now let's talk about Ugledar area, about the Ugledar front line. This is the most important town, this is the most powerful, the most important fortification from the Ukrainian side. If we are talking about this area, we can say that at least at this stage of this special operation of this war, there are four important towns in this area. The first one that it's all these towns is about Ugledar front line, because all these towns are connected with this front line, and if any of this town falls, it causes some damage to or give some benefits to one of the party in this special operation. The first town is Marinka, the biggest fortification since the beginning of the special military operation. The Russians made a lot of attempts trying to penetrate the defense orders in this area, but all their attempts were defeated. Some Russian sources are saying that during the first days of the special operation, when the Russians were moving all along the front lines, they started doing something in this area. Some Russian sources are saying that the Russians, because of maybe without experience, because maybe they didn't expect, but they burned a lot of DPR soldiers in these trenches, Marinka trenches. That's like obvious fact, but the Russians are not talking about this situation. Maybe it's some kind of speculation because I don't have any evidence of that, but I read some military experts from this area, and they were saying that during the first months the Russians burned a lot of reserves in these trenches. The next town is Novomikhailivka. This one, Novomikhailivka. The Russians also made a lot of attempts trying to penetrate defense orders in this area, but all the attempts failed. But this is also one of the most important towns in this area. And we are talking about, let's say, Ugledar agglomeration. If we're talking about this area, there are at least three towns that plays a significant role in this, at least on this front line. The first one is Pavlovka, the second one is Ugledar itself, and the third one is Vadiane, these towns. As you can see, there are a lot of fields, just 5 towns we discussed. Pavlovka, Ugledar, Vadiane, Novomikhailivka and Marinka, 5 towns, a lot of fields and a lot of forces from both sides. During a few days ago, maybe the day before, the Russians started their counter-offensive operation, and they started from attacking in the direction of Pavlovka. I read a lot of military experts about from Russia about this attack, and many of them agreed and discussed the situation, and they agreed that attack in direction of Pavlovka let's say, was done not in time. The Russians, according to these experts, the Russians weren't prepared to this attack, or maybe not weren't prepared. So something is wrong. So the main idea that those military experts were trying to develop is that attack in Pavlovka there's something wrong with this attack, something wrong, and anyway, this is not the main goal in the main attack direction of the Russians for many reasons. One of them is that if we take a look at the Western sources map, we're gonna see that there is a river Kashlygach, this one, and there is just one area where the Russians are able to cross, or Ukrainians, this river. This is the bridge one, this is the only bridge. There are some small bridges, but I'm not sure that the Ukrainians or anybody are able to use this bridge with vehicles, just like infantry and so on. So the Russians, even if they are able to take control over Pavlovka, they need to solve another issue, how to cross the river Kashlygach, because most of the Russian military experts are saying that there is no point to take control of Pavlovka without developing further offensive operation in the direction of Vuhledar. If the main goal just to take Pavlovka is just a blind media victory, and to tell the truth, anyway, in the next months, the Ukrainians do have possibility without any problem to take control over Pavlovka back. So it's not the town that you need to take as a strategic victory goal. It's just a tactical achievement that you need before taking the entire Ugledar. So without Ugledar, this town doesn't have any price or any cost. Furthermore, the Russians are saying that if you take a look at this Ugledar from Google Earth map, the Russians are saying, the Russian military forces in this area, the Russian reporters from this area are saying that Ugledar is located on the hill. Is on the hill, and Pavlovka and the town on the Nikolska, Pavlovka, these two towns, this Nikolska and Pavlovka, and according to the Russian source map, will remind that Nikolska is under Russian control, this town. Pavlovka, there are heavy clashes right now, right there. The Russians are saying that Pavlovka, this the town that the Russians are storming right now, is totally in front of Ugledar. So at least if you control Ugledar, you're able to control, even if you're taking a look at from this area, we see that even from these buildings, I believe that we can see a big part of Pavlovka. And the Russian military experts are saying that it's very difficult to take entire town. The only thing that you can do, at least at the first stages of fencing operation in Pavlovka, if you are planning to just to take Pavlovka, you won't be able to take control over entire town. For one of the reasons is that from Ugledar you are able to establish fire control over the street that moves along the river Kashlygach. So the Russians, it's highly unlikely that the Russians are able to they are able to take control, but the Ukrainians from Ugledar are able to see any single movement on the streets of this small village. So that's why they are able to reduce the Russian forces. So it's not very easy to take entire Pavlovka. And as you can see, according to the Russian sources, there is like a gray line saying that the Russians, yes, they got control over the south part of Pavlovka, but they stopped. They stopped not because of the fact that they are not able to take the entire Pavlovka because of I don't know, cool Ukrainians who are staying there and not giving up. This is not the reason. The reason is that the Ukrainians from Ugledar are able to control any single movement on these few first lines of this town. And if the Russians want to develop the infiltration, they will have a lot of losses. From the other side, the Russians knows that there is just one way how to cross the river Kashlygach using these two bridges, one bridge and another one. Maybe these bridges are damaged, but anyway, so the situation is like as follows. The Ukrainians are not able to move a lot of reinforcement in this area, but the Russians are not able to take the north part of Pavlovka because in this case they will be completely spotted by the Ukrainians from Ugledar and will be reduced by the artillery fire. So I believe that operation with Pavlovka has ended, or at least at this stage has ended. The Russians, at least with this configuration of the front line, are not going to develop their offensive operation. The Russians will start their offensive operation to take control over entire Pavlovka, and they will try to cross the river in case if the Russians are able to develop their offensive operation, their progress on any other front line. Of course, if we're talking about Marinka doesn't play much in the operation about Ugledar. The only thing that the Russians are able to do by storming Marinka, and as you can see there is an icon of storming Marinka, and today we got a lot of reports that the Russians started movement in this suicide operation. I believe that's like it's some kind of fake attack, and the main goal, of course, to pin down the Ukrainians and to force them, of course, to reinforce this area, to move some shells, ammunition, reinforcements in this area. Of course, the main goal to reduce the supply support that might go in direction of Ugledar during these clashes. Of course, the Russians are able to take Marinka, but I can't even imagine the situation when the Russians are able to take Marinka and storming this town in front. So we understand that the main goal of attack in direction of Marinka for today, the Russians decided to pin down the Ukrainians, to pin down some reserves that Ukrainians are able to move in direction of Ugledar, to reduce their supply and support of Ugledar, because of course some sources and military resources this town by the Ukrainians will take to stop the Russians' attack. But this is also from the other side, this is a very big question. So we understand that this is suicide fortification, and anyway the Russians are going to have losses even by storming, by doing some fake attack in this direction. And the thing is that the Russians they know that this is a very bad idea, but they were forced to start offensive operation in direction of Marinka to pin down the Ukrainians. So that means that not everything is not so 100% good on the Ugledar bridgehead as we can see, or as we can understand according to the reports we have. So the Russians were forced to start, like say, flank attack, at least with on purpose to reduce the resources that might go to the Ugledar bridgehead. These forces, they don't need to take control of Marinka. They just need to force the Ukrainians to fight in this area, and of course to reduce the loss from their own side. And there are two towns left in this area, Novomikhailivka and Vodyane. These two towns, Novomikhailivka and Vodyane. Vodyane is located on the, let's say, northeast from Ugledar, and we can say this is the second area to attack Ugledar, let's say from another direction. And Novomikhailivka. During the progress of the offensive operation during the previous 2 days, the Russians managed to take control over the landfills or highlands on the area that located on the north and on the west from Solotka. There's the area, green line between green and gray. This is the area that the Russians managed to take control over. They took a lot of very important highlands, strategic highlands, that from these highlands they are able to establish fire control, artillery control over the towns around this area, and the most important over Novomikhailivka. And furthermore, because of the fact that now the Russians can control the south part of Novomikhailivka, today we got the first information, the first update, that the Russians managed to not just enter, but to establish stable positions on the south part of this town. So the south part of this town is under the Russians. I'm not saying that Ukrainians are not able to push them back. We'll need to follow about for the progress of this operation, but this is the very big progress. The Russians managed to enter Novomikhailivka. And another attack, the Russians attacks in direction of Vodyane, this town, and today we got at least a few updates that the Russians send every single aircraft they are able to send and that they don't care about. It's like Su-25 airplanes in this direction, trying to reduce as much as possible of the Ukrainians, to pin down them. And today we got update that the Russians established fire control over this road. And now forces from Ugledar are no longer able to achieve supply and support from this line. We don't have any updates about the progress in Vodyane, but according to some Russians, they pushed some, battalions or campaigns in this direction. So this is the picture. And to tell the truth, I understand that we discussed at least, as it's 5 towns in this area, one more time, Pavlovka, Uglidar, Vadiana, Novomikhalovka, and Marinka. And I believe that the most important area and the most important operation that the Russians are trying to develop is Novomikhalovka, this town. This is the most important town, and this is the most important town for many reasons. One of them is that this town is less fortified than Marinka, and as you can see, by taking Novomikhalovka, the Russians will be able to start developing their offensive operation along this river. This is not Kashlagach river, this is another river. Let's take a look at the title of this river. It's the Ikriana. I know there are a lot of like rivers, lakes in this area. Oh no, this one, sorry. This is the Lake Sukhiyali, yes. So, by moving along Novomikhalovka, they will be able to take all these towns one by one without the most difficult thing during the upcoming period. They don't need to cross fields, like the hundreds or tens or dozens of kilometers of the mud in the fields. They are able to get this town and move block by block to the west, trying to crack these towns. And the most important thing, that by attacking Novomikhalovka, the Russians, if they are able to take this town, let's say get to this line, they will be able to cut the roads of supply, and then they will be able to develop further. And as you can see, there is just one road of supply support that supports this defense line, and this direction that the Ukrainians are able to support their fortification. Just one road. This is a very long road, but I believe that the Russians do have possibilities to establish fire control over this road and to reduce the support and supply of the Ukrainians as much as possible. So I believe that Novomikhalovka is the main direction of the Russian attack, and by attacking this town, by attacking this line of towns, they will be able to split this area into parts. And if the Russians are able to develop as long as possible during this front line, I understand that Uglidar and the south of this area will be collapsed automatically without even heavy clashes. Because if this line falls, that we just discussed, there is no need to fight for the south, because the Ukrainians, they will run from this area, because we understand without this line, they will not have any support and supply, and there is a high risk of being encircled. And I believe that there are a lot of forces on this bridgehead as well. So, as we discussed this situation, the Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours of their storming operation, the Ukraine lost around 60 soldiers and something around 5 armored vehicles in this area. Now, let's move to the north and let's discuss about Bakhmut. Today we got a very interesting update from Bakhmut. You know that when the Russians liberate or get control over any single town, first thing they do, they adopt some kind of local law where they're trying to say and describe the hierarchy of the towns. And today, the head of DPR reported he adopted some kind of law saying that town by the name of Opotnaya, this one located on the south of Bakhmut, is from now on under Russian control. So that means saying that with that these words, this adoption law means that the Russians got control over this town. For now, we don't have any confirmation on the map, any other confirmation or any other source, but anyway, that was the thing that were adopted today in DPR, saying that this town from now on is under total DPR, and that means total under Russian control. So as you can see, the Russians are pushing in Bakhmut as well, very slow, step by step, but they have some progress. Now we're moving to Liman Kupinsk front line. And to tell the truth, during the previous reports we discussed that Ukrainians did some offensive operation, but they failed all the time. But to tell the truth, I believe that sometimes the Russian sources are not correct by saying this or that, providing this or that information, because Today, let's say this Novosovska, as you remember, yesterday we discussed this town, and I told you that the Western sources reported that this town was taken by the Ukrainians. And if we're talking about the Russians, they didn't provide information. We discussed this. We were relying our information on the informational Ministry of Defense. They reported that all the attempts that made by the Ukrainians were failed, so on. And today the Russian sources reported that this town did really was taken by the Ukrainians, and we got this confirmation from the Ministry of Defense report. They reported that they were attacking the Ukrainians in this area. So that means that if they were attacking Ukrainians in this area, that means that maybe this town is under Ukrainian control. But anyway, the Russians reported that as a result of the heavy clashes along the front line from Dvoriechia to Liman in this area, the Ukrainians lost around 280 soldiers and something around 25 vehicles, including tanks, armored vehicles, just regular cars, and so on. So the losses are very high, and we see that Ukrainians, they're still trying to penetrate this area and to get the road that connects Kreminna and Svatova very slowly with very heavy losses, but they achieved some success. Let's see if they are able to follow this operation, this offensive operation for a long time, but not for another week or something like this. And the last area we're going to discuss is Kherson district. The same picture, the same areas, the same towns. The Ukrainians are trying to find the weakest position on the Russian front line, and as a result of the heavy clashes during the previous 24 hours, the Ukraine lost around 70 soldiers and something around 13 armored vehicles on this front line. As you can see, the losses are not so big, but if we calculate every single day, we see that their losses are. So we can sense and feel these losses. Another important data are coming from the entire Ukraine. As you can see, there are a lot of icons saying that the Russians continue destroying, reducing the energy facility of Ukraine. And if before today we talked that, according to the Ukrainian sources and some Russian sources, if we were talking that the Russians managed to reduce the Ukrainian energy facility for 30%, I believe that starting from today, we can say that the Russians managed to reduce the Ukrainian energy facilities around 45%, because the damage they dealt is very big. Almost every single town was during the day without electricity, without water. We saw a lot of lines among the people who are trying to get some water for their families. So the situation is very bad and very critical. But if we're talking about the Ukrainian sources, today, they made a small speculation by saying that the Russians sent around 55 rockets at that the Ukrainians managed to shut down around 45 rockets. Later, they reported that the Russians managed to get around 18 objects of energy facilities. So if we calculate 45 rockets that were shut down by the Ukrainians plus 18, it's a little bit more than 55 rockets. So, or the Ukrainians attacked their own energy facilities with their rockets, or the Russians sent much more rockets than the Ukrainians reported about. For now, there are no more updates. I believe that tomorrow and the day after we're going to see the real result of these attacks. But we are going to see which towns will be shut down from electricity and so on. But anyway, situation becomes more and more critical every single day, and we see that nobody is going to start any negotiation. If you're talking about me, for me, some kind of important day like checkpoint, by passing this checkpoint, we can say that we enter the next stage of this special operation, not even global scope, maybe some kind of local tactical, is the 8th of November, the election in the United States of America. Of course, we understand that this election might bring some changes to this conflict, because if we're talking about the Russians, I read the Russian Telegram channels, I'm following these military experts. To tell the truth, they are waiting for Republicans to win as, I don't know, as some holiday, because they're saying, you can read this information all over the Russian Telegram channels, they're saying that if Republicans are going to win, then the negotiation process is going to start, or the United States of America are going to reduce the supply and support of Ukraine and so on. So to tell the truth, the Russians are for the Republican Party of the United States of America. This is so interesting, and sometimes it's so funny to follow these updates, but anyway, the Russians are for Republicans, and it's very interesting, it's very nice. And as you can see, the Democracy Party doesn't have a lot of support from the Russians, and I believe that they didn't have in the past as well. And that's it for today. Military Samurai channel reminds you to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.